All right, so I just want to go over a quick example with you guys of how to solve and not solve a rational inequality. So let's talk about the wrong way to solve these guys first. Now normally when we're solving something like a rational equation and I have fraction equals another fraction, I get to cross multiply. And I see a lot of times that people will do that same strategy when we're working with equations, or sorry, inequalities rather than equations. So they think of like the 5 as if it's 5 over 1, and then they do this. And they say 2 times 1 must be greater than 5 times x plus 3. And then do this, and then try to solve something like this. They move the 2 over, and then they say, okay, so I'm solving for where 5x plus 13 is less than 0. We actually cannot do this, and part of the reason why we can't do this is because we want to be able to identify where the important parts of our function are, right? So I want to be able to identify where the zeros of the equation are, and I also want to be able to identify for my sign chart where the asymptotes are or undefined points are, because I might have a change in whether the function's positive or negative at those particular areas. So when I look at this, I actually can only see a potential x-intercept here, and I can't see any restrictions. So that's not exactly going to work for us in this function. I want to make sure I can see all possible zeros and all possible restrictions. So what we want to do instead is actually what we did in our question that we took up, and that is we want to move all terms to one side. So we think of the inequality kind of like an equal sign, but not in the sense that we're allowed to cross multiply. I can move the 5 over, and I will get subtract 5. And then our job is to find a common denominator. So we'll think of this as 5 over 1, and this side needs an x plus 3. We only actually switch the direction of the inequality if we divide by a negative. So not if we just move a term to the opposite side. Yeah, good question though. Okay, so now we've got this common denominator here. And we're going to kind of merge those into one fraction. Another big mistake that I see, especially when we have subtraction happening on the top, is people forget to bring this negative into each term in this expansion here. So just make sure that your negative goes into each term there. Okay, and then what I would do is I would just identify the zeros and restrictions from here, and I would make my sign chart. Now you can see why this kind of still matches up with part of this, right? I can still see the x-intercept or the solution of this function, but if I were to go and make a sign chart with what I have here, I would be missing a whole section of my function, right? I'd be missing this negative part, and I'd also be missing this x plus 3 part. So when I go to make my sign chart, I'm missing a lot of information in where this function could potentially be changing from negative to positive or positive to negative. So that's why we can't do, thank you, that's why we can't do that cross-multiplying deal, okay? I also want to just make a little note for you guys here. When you set up your zeros, which in this case would be x equals negative 13 over 5, and your restrictions in your sign chart, okay, in this case our restriction is x cannot equal 3. I'm not going to finish this whole question because I think you guys, we've already done examples of this before. But each part of the function here needs to be in my chart at the end. So what I mean by that is I see a lot of times that people will, I guess -3 is smaller here, right? I see a lot of times that people will set up their chart and they'll put 5x plus 13 and then x plus 3, but I'm missing part of my function that actually changes the entire sign of that particular section, and that's the negative. So you have two options. You can include the negative up here in front of the 5x plus 13, or you could include the negative in its own section, and then everything here will just be negative, negative, negative. But that definitely affects whether your section of your graph is positive or negative. So you definitely want to make sure that this negative occurs somewhere in your sign chart, okay? Same deal if it's like a -2 in front or something like that. I'm going to make sure that somewhere in my sign chart, whether I give it its own column or whether I put it in front of like one of the brackets that's on the top. Okay, so just a couple of things to watch out for there, and yeah, you guys don't have to finish solving this. You're gonna do a lot, but if you want to practice, you can try solving it from there.